Brooklyn Carter stood frozen as the trophy she rightfully earned was handed to her white teammate. The crowd cheered, unaware the final score had been quietly changed. Her coach called it a clerical mistake. Her father called it what it was, erasure. Cameras rolled. Her lips didn't move, but her eyes said, "This isn't over." Then the school called the police on her. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The sun hadn't risen yet, but Brooklyn Carter was already running drills on the school's empty soccer field. Her breath steamed in the cold morning air, her cleats slicing across dew-soaked grass, as she weaved through cones and launched shot after shot into the net. She did this 6 days a week, without fail. She didn't just want to be the best, she had to be. Her father always told her, "You don't get to be average, Brooklyn. Not here, not like this." And she wasn't. Stat sheets from practice showed it clearly. Highest sprint speed, most accurate passes, top goal ratio. Her body held the evidence of brutal discipline: tight hamstrings, taped fingers, bruises from impact training. Yet every game day the same ritual played out. Her name was never called from the lineup. She stood, helmet tucked under one arm, cleats ready, heart pounding, only to hear the coach pass her by, again and again. Her teammates noticed. They whispered about it during water breaks, and shared glances in the locker room. Some muttered things like, "Maybe she's just too intense," or "Coach probably doesn't want drama." But Brooklyn heard the real reason in the pauses, that silent discomfort people had when trying not to say race. Coach Delaney always had a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's not personal," he told her once, brushing off her confusion. "It's just team dynamics. We've got a rhythm. You'll get your chance." But that chance never came. Brooklyn's mother, Alicia, told her to stay focused. "It's politics, baby. You keep shining and they'll have to recognize you." But it wasn't politics. Not really. Malcolm Carter, her father, had seen this before. He'd seen it in his own life as a young engineer passed over for promotions, in meetings where his ideas were claimed by others, in how he'd been treated every time he walked into a bank or courthouse in his own skin. So when he sat on the bleachers and watched his daughter drill circles around the starting players, but never be called to the field, that old knot formed in his stomach again. Something unspoken. Something heavy. Still, Brooklyn kept pushing. She stayed late after practice, reviewing footage, refining her game. Sometimes she trained until the janitors shut off the lights. She told herself it was just a matter of time. One evening, after a grueling practice where she outpaced everyone in conditioning sprints, she walked past the coach's office. The door was ajar. Inside, Coach Delaney was laughing with 2 assistant coaches, both white men in their 30s. "She's too flashy. Don't want her thinking she runs the team," one of them said. Brooklyn froze. Delaney replied, "She's got talent, sure, but we're building team culture here, not a charity case." Brooklyn didn't breathe. She stepped back, quiet, the words echoing in her chest. Charity case? The next day, she trained harder. At home, Malcolm watched her through the kitchen window. Her kicks were sharp, precise. She practiced with a fire he hadn't seen in her since tryouts. But he also saw the slump in her shoulders when she thought no one was looking. He'd spent years teaching Brooklyn how to navigate a world that often didn't see her, but nothing prepared him for watching her vanish in plain sight. Malcolm started keeping records, stats, footage, attendance logs. He compiled them quietly, noting every time a player was rotated in, how many minutes they got, and Brooklyn's comparative metrics. The data was undeniable. She wasn't just good, she was the best player they had, and she was the only black girl on the team. After a particularly frustrating game, where Brooklyn remained on the bench for all 4 quarters, despite the team's loss, Malcolm had enough. That night at dinner, he brought it up. "She's not playing because she's black," he said plainly. Alicia looked up, surprised. Brooklyn didn't say anything. She just stared down at her plate, silently turning her fork in her hand. "I've seen this before," Malcolm continued. "It's the same game with a different name. They'll never admit it, but it's there, and if we don't call it out, they'll keep doing it." Brooklyn finally looked up. "If I say something, I'm a problem. If I stay quiet, I disappear." "You won't disappear," Malcolm said. "Not with me here." 2 days later, Malcolm arrived at practice unannounced. He leaned against the chain-link fence, arms crossed, watching. Brooklyn was everywhere, leading warm-ups, dominating in scrimmage, setting up goals for her teammates, Delaney barely glanced her way. When the whistle blew, and the team broke into cool-down stretches, Malcolm approached the sideline. The assistant coaches shifted uncomfortably. Delaney pretended not to see him. "Coach Delaney," Malcolm said evenly. The coach turned, fake smile snapping into place. "Mr. Carter, always good to see supportive parents out here." Malcolm didn't smile. "Just had a quick question." "Sure," Delaney said, already moving toward the exit. Malcolm followed. "Why isn't my daughter playing?" Delaney blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Around them, players froze mid-conversation. Some turned away, pretending not to listen. Others glanced nervously at each other. Brooklyn stood by the benches, her towel clutched in one hand. "She leads your team in every performance metric," Malcolm continued, voice calm but firm. "So why does she never start?" Delaney hesitated. "Like I've said before, team dynamics. She's got potential, but we're managing personalities. We need cohesion." "She is cohesion," Malcolm replied. "She supports her teammates, lifts everyone up, doesn't start drama, works harder than anyone here. So again, why isn't she playing?" The silence stretched. One of the assistants shifted uncomfortably, mumbling something about needing to check equipment. The players had gone completely still. Delaney's jaw tightened. "This really isn't the time or place." "Seems like exactly the right time," Malcolm said, his eyes locked on the coach. "Unless there's a reason you don't want to say out loud." Something flickered across Delaney's face, a flash of discomfort, maybe even guilt, and then he recovered. "I think we're done here." "No," Malcolm said, stepping in front of him. "We're not. Because the next game, if she's not on that field, we're going to have a different kind of conversation. One with cameras. One with lawyers." The players' eyes widened. Delaney didn't respond. He walked away, lips pressed thin. Brooklyn stared at her father, eyes wide with fear and pride. Malcolm nodded at her once, then turned and left the field. The next day, at school, the atmosphere shifted. Whispers followed Brooklyn through the hallways. Teachers looked at her with forced neutrality. Some teammates avoided her completely. A few offered sympathetic glances, but none spoke up. That afternoon, the locker room was quiet as players suited up for a home game. Brooklyn sat in silence, tying her laces, heart pounding. Coach Delaney walked in, clipboard in hand. "Starting lineup," he announced. One by one, he read off the names. Brooklyn waited, but when he reached the last name, and it wasn't hers, something changed in the room. Heads turned. A heavy silence filled the space. And then, a voice rang out from the doorway. It was Malcolm. "Coach Delaney," he said loudly. Every head whipped around. "Before you start this game," Malcolm said, stepping into the room, "tell this team, tell me why my daughter isn't playing." The entire locker room went dead silent. The moment Malcolm asks the coach why his daughter isn't playing, the entire locker room goes silent. The locker room still felt charged from the confrontation the day before. Brooklyn could feel that heavy silence clinging to her like humidity, sticky and suffocating. Even as she walked through the hallways the next morning, students parted around her in small clusters, whispering about the scene her father had caused. Some wore sympathy on their faces, others amusement, and still others discomfort, like they were seeing her for the first time and didn't know where to place her. But none of that prepared her for what waited on the main hallway display. Each year, the school released a glossy, oversized poster promoting athletic diversity, a collage of smiling student athletes from different teams, meant to show the school's supposed commitment to inclusivity. The posters were usually plastered across every hallway, hanging from rafters decorating bulletin boards. This year's banner had just been unveiled. It stretched nearly 10 feet long. Brooklyn walked up to it slowly, her eyes scanning the familiar faces. The girls' volleyball team, the track sprinters, the basketball roster, the soccer starters. Then the realization hit her like a shove. She wasn't in it. Not even in the background. Not even cropped into a corner. She wasn't kneeling at the end of the row, or standing with teammates, or included in the action shots they took during practice. Her name wasn't listed in the caption at the bottom, identifying players. She had been erased so thoroughly that if someone didn't know she was on the team, they'd assume she wasn't. But there she was. Or rather wasn't, while two players who attended half the practices were featured prominently near the center. One had even quit mid-season last year. Still somehow, she made it onto the poster. A slow burn of disbelief crept up Brooklyn's spine. She stepped closer, studying each image. In one shot, she remembered standing directly behind the forward line, as the photographer snapped. Yet in this edited version, the frame ended just before her shoulder. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. Two girls from the team approached the poster, laughing about something unrelated, until they saw Brooklyn standing there. Their smiles slipped into an awkward flatness. "Hey, Brooke," one said softly. Brooklyn didn't look at them. "When did you guys take these pictures?" "Last week," the girl replied. "Coach said only the starting roster was needed." Brooklyn turned her head sharply. "That's not how it's been done. Ever." The two teammates exchanged glances. One offered a weak shrug. "We just did what he told us." Brooklyn's jaw tightened. Of course, as they drifted away, clearly relieved to escape, she kept staring at the poster until her vision blurred. It wasn't just exclusion, it was controlled representation, an image carefully curated to show a version of the team that erased the girl who threatened their narrative. The school wanted diverse imagery, but not too diverse. Not the kind that challenged comfort. Not the kind that made people question who held power. Her absence wasn't an oversight, it was an agenda. When she got home, the poster was still on her mind. Malcolm noticed immediately. "You're quiet," he said, setting down his coffee mug. Brooklyn pulled out her phone and showed him the picture she'd taken. Malcolm leaned forward, studying it, his eyes narrowing. "No," he said softly. "No. They did." "They did." He stared at it for a long moment, shaking his head slowly. "They really think they can do this and get away with it? They already did." Malcolm's voice deepened. "They cut you out like you don't exist. Like you're not even part of the team." Brooklyn swallowed hard. That's exactly what it feels like. He stood up, pacing the kitchen, trying to keep his anger contained. First they bench you, then they talk circles around why. Now they erase you from a poster that's supposed to show diversity. You can't tell me this isn't intentional. Alicia walked in just then, reading the tension immediately. When Malcolm showed her the photo, she let out a breath. This is more than bias. This is them controlling the narrative. It's them sending a message, Malcolm corrected. And the message is that she doesn't belong. He set the phone down with a controlled exhale, but his jaw told another story, one of a father whose patience was thinning fast. The next day, Brooklyn felt the aftershocks in school. Some students pointed at the poster and then at her, whispering questions. Others posted it on social media, adding captions like "Where's Brooklyn?" or "Did they seriously crop her out?" A few classmates defended the school, dismissing it as a misunderstanding. Maybe they just didn't have space, one girl claimed. But no one could ignore that nearly all the faces on the poster were white, and the only black athlete representing any team was a boy from track who rarely competed. Brooklyn walked away from each conversation, carrying a weight she didn't ask for. A silent burden. A deliberate erasure. At lunch, her teammate Claire sat across from her hesitantly. "I saw the poster," she said. "It's messed up." Brooklyn didn't lift her eyes. "It's whatever." "No," Claire insisted. "It's not whatever. You deserve to be on it. Tell that to the coach." Claire hesitated. "You know he picks who gets photographed." Brooklyn looked up, and the expression in her eyes made Claire flinch. "Yeah," Brooklyn said quietly. "I know." After school, she found herself walking slower to the bus, dragging the day behind her. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, something steady rose. A stubborn, refusing to shrink kind of resolve. If they were going to erase her, she would make herself impossible to ignore. That evening, Malcolm stood by the living room window, hands in his pockets, waiting for Brooklyn to come downstairs. When she did, he turned to her with a new seriousness. "I'm going to practice tomorrow," he said. "I want to see exactly what's happening out there." Brooklyn stiffened. "Dad, people already think I'm making trouble." "You aren't making trouble," Malcolm said. "You're getting sabotaged. I don't want them to think I can't handle this." Malcolm walked toward her, his voice gentler now. "You shouldn't have to handle it alone. I'm not storming in to yell. I'm going to sit quietly in the bleachers, just to watch." Brooklyn hesitated. "And then what?" "Then," he said, "I decide what needs to happen next. But first I want to see it with my own eyes." She nodded slowly. A part of her felt relief. Another part feared what he might discover. The next day, Malcolm arrived early, taking a seat in the highest row of the bleachers. He didn't want to disrupt anything. He simply wanted the full view. He folded his arms, leaned back, and watched. Brooklyn stretched on the field, preparing for drills. The team trickled out behind her, moving with lazy energy compared to her sharp, focused movements. Coach Delaney walked across the field holding a clipboard. He glanced toward the bleachers, saw Malcolm, and his expression tightened briefly before he forced it back into neutral. He blew the whistle, calling the team into formation. From the bleachers, Malcolm noted everything: which players were acknowledged, which were ignored, how feedback was distributed, and who received encouragement versus indifference. When Brooklyn completed drills flawlessly, the coach didn't react. Another girl fumbled a pass, and Delaney rushed to correct her warmly, clapping her on the shoulder. Malcolm's jaw clenched, but the moment that stunned him came 20 minutes into practice. During a passing rotation, Brooklyn executed a clean assist, fast, precise, perfectly angled. The forward who received the ball hesitated before shooting. Clearly caught off guard by the quality of the pass, Delaney immediately blew his whistle. "That's why we don't let her control plays," he called out. "It throws everyone off." Malcolm leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Delaney continued, "Loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's stick with players who know their lanes." Reset. Brooklyn's face didn't change, but Malcolm saw the tiny flicker in her posture, the kind that comes from absorbing a hit you expected but still weren't ready for. As practice continued, Malcolm watched one pattern repeat over and over. Whenever Brooklyn excelled, Delaney framed it as disruption. Whenever she faltered slightly, he highlighted it as a flaw. It wasn't coaching, it was targeted shaping of perception, molding teammates into seeing her as an obstacle instead of an asset. Malcolm leaned back slowly, a cold awareness settling over him. But just as he was trying to process the layers of what he was witnessing, something else happened. Something he had never expected. One of the assistant coaches approached Delaney and whispered something. Delaney stiffened, glancing sharply up at the bleachers. His eyes locked with Malcolm's, and then the coach did something deeply unsettling. He smirked. Not a nervous smirk, not a polite one, a knowing smirk. One that suggested, "You can watch all you want, you still can't touch me." Malcolm's stomach dropped. And then from across the field, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A second poster, propped against equipment crates near the bench. It was the original diversity poster, the unedited one. And in that version, Brooklyn was clearly visible. Before Malcolm could process what that meant, an assistant coach picked up the poster, hesitated, glanced toward Delaney, and then began tearing it apart, rip after rip, reducing Brooklyn's presence to shreds. Malcolm stood abruptly. The assistant froze, eyes widening. Brooklyn looked toward the bleachers, just in time to see her father witnessing the destruction of proof that she had ever been included. And then everything stopped. Malcolm stares down at the shredded original poster, realizing the school hadn't just excluded his daughter, they had actively erased evidence she belonged. The atmosphere around the team shifted after the shredded poster incident, though no one dared to mention it out loud. Brooklyn felt the shift most sharply during the bus ride to their next away game. The air was thick, packed with something unspoken, something brittle. Teammates avoided her eyes, their gazes flitting nervously between her and the front of the bus where Coach Delaney sat. Brooklyn sat by the window, headphones around her neck but no music playing. She watched trees blur past as the miles rolled beneath them, each one tightening the coil inside her chest. After everything she'd endured, the benching, the erasure, the deliberate sabotage, she still wanted to play. Everything in her body still ached for the field. Her love for soccer hadn't dimmed, even as the world around it soured. Malcolm had been quiet that morning. Too quiet, as if carrying the weight of what he'd witnessed at practice. When he dropped her off at the school, he squeezed her shoulder lightly. "Just play your game," he said, "and I'll be watching." She saw the lines of worry around his eyes, the ones he tried so hard to hide. The gym of the opposing school buzzed with restless energy as the girls walked in. The bleachers were crowded, the air thick with echoes of cheers and footsteps. Parents waved at their daughters, teammates bumped fists, and opposing players sized each other up. Brooklyn felt their eyes linger on her longer than usual, not with intimidation, but curiosity, maybe even surprise. Their team warmed up on the sidelines. Brooklyn moved with precision, each stretch purposeful, each drill sharp. She worked silently, her movements a wordless declaration. "I am here. I am worthy. I do not disappear." But when the whistle blew for the game to start, she already knew what would happen. She took her seat on the bench. Again. The game unfolded painfully predictably. Their opponents were strong, coordinated, and their offense cut through Delaney's defense, like water through fractured stone. In the first 10 minutes, The opposing team scored. 10 minutes later, they scored again. By the midpoint of the second half, the scoreboard read, Brooklyn felt her stomach twist with each goal. Not because they were losing, but because she knew she could change the momentum if given the chance. She knew she could help. But the decision wasn't hers. It was his. Parents in the stands shouted instructions, encouragement and frustration. One father yelled, "Put Carter in. Let the girl play." Another added, "She's your fastest runner, what are you doing?" Delaney's jaw shifted, but he pretended not to hear. Then finally, with 15 minutes left on the clock, he turned reluctantly toward Brooklyn. "Carter," he said, voice clipped. "Go warm up." Her heart kicked, a mix of adrenaline and caution. She nodded and jogged down the sideline. Her muscles woke instantly. Her pulse thrummed. She'd been waiting for this all season, even if it came too late, even if it came from pressure rather than belief. She seized it anyway. She stepped onto the field, her cleats hitting the turf with a weighted significance. From the stands, Malcolm watched intently. His phone was already in his hand, recording. Brooklyn took her position. The ball was in motion again. Within seconds, she changed the energy on the field. Her speed disrupted the opposing defense. Her precision unsettled their formation. Her teammates looked shocked but grateful. They needed this momentum, even if their coach refused to acknowledge it. 6 minutes later, an opportunity emerged. A teammate slipped the ball to her at midfield. Brooklyn controlled it flawlessly, pivoting past a defender. Another opponent lunged, but Brooklyn sidestepped her, accelerating toward the goal with explosive clarity. The crowd surged with anticipation. Malcolm rose from his seat. Brooklyn was unstoppable, until she heard it. A sharp, cutting yell from the sidelines. "Stop running, you people always choke." Her body froze mid-stride. It was the tone, not just the words, that pierced her. Something old, something ugly, something she had heard in stories from her grandmother's era, not from the mouth of a coach in the 21st century. The defenders crashed in. The moment shattered. Gasps rippled through the stands. Brooklyn stumbled, recovering too late to finish the shot. The ball was intercepted. The chance disappeared. For a moment, Brooklyn couldn't breathe. Her chest felt hollowed out. She turned slowly toward the sideline and saw Delaney. His face was flushed, his jaw tight, eyes narrowed at her as if she had done something wrong. But he didn't look ashamed. He looked angry, as if she had forced him to reveal something he wanted to keep hidden. Several parents stood up. Voices rose. A few shouted, "We heard that." One mother yelled, "What did you just say to her?" Delaney waved them off as if they were overreacting. "Back to the game," he barked. "Focus." But the damage was done. The energy had shifted, and in the stands a father named Reggie Thomas, whose daughter played for the opposing team, didn't just witness the moment, he captured it. Reggie had pulled out his phone the second he saw Brooklyn racing for the goal, wanting to record a highlight for his own daughter's learning. Instead, he recorded something else. Something no one expected. After the game ended in a crushing loss, players trudged to the locker rooms. But Reggie didn't leave. He approached Malcolm instead. "Sir," he said, voice steady, "you need to see this." Malcolm watched the footage right there on the bleachers. The video showed Brooklyn sprinting. It showed her lining up the perfect shot. It captured Delaney's shout, clear enough to make nearby parents recoil. Malcolm's face hardened as the slur echoed from the phone. Reggie spoke quietly. "I don't know what's been going on, but whatever it is, this ain't right. If you want the full clip, I'll send it." "Please," Malcolm said, his voice thick. When Brooklyn emerged from the locker room, her shoulders were low, her face pale. She tried to walk past Malcolm, but he held the phone out to her gently. "Brooke, watch this." She hesitated. Then she took the phone. Within seconds, tears welled in her eyes. Not from shock, but from a deep, bone-level confirmation of a truth she had been forced to swallow for months. A truth she had hoped wasn't real, even as she lived inside it. He said that while she started, but the words failed. Malcolm stepped close, his voice soft but unshakable. "He did, and now we have proof." Brooklyn closed her eyes, letting the truth wash over her. Proof. Finally, she handed the phone back, inhaling shakily. "What are we gonna do?" Malcolm didn't hesitate. "We're going to make sure the world sees it." And he meant it. He spent the night at the kitchen table, reviewing the footage frame by frame, making sure it was clear and unedited. Brooklyn sat at the far end, wrapped in a blanket, watching him with a mix of fear and hope. Alicia hovered nearby, uncertain but supportive. Once it's out there, she said quietly, there's no taking it back. I know, Malcolm replied. But if we stay quiet, nothing changes. He uploaded the video to his social media account with a single caption. This is how my daughter is treated by her coach. Enough. The moment he pressed post, silence filled the room. The kind of silence that exists just before a storm. Malcolm exhaled long and slow. Brooklyn stared at the screen, gripping her blanket tighter. Alicia touched her daughter's shoulder gently, as if anchoring her to something solid. None of them slept that night. And by morning, everything had changed. Malcolm checks his phone. The video has exploded overnight, skyrocketing across the internet, gaining traction at a speed none of them were prepared for. By sunrise, Malcolm's post had crossed 50,000 views. By 8 a.m. it had passed 100,000. And by the time Brooklyn arrived at school, the video was everywhere. It wasn't just on TikTok anymore. It had leaked to Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, and even a few early news blogs. Influencers with millions of followers reshared it with captions like, "This is why we don't trust institutions," and "Black excellence blocked on purpose." Again, hashtags formed like wildfire.
Let Brooklyn play.
Coach Delaney, sabotaged on camera. But with the internet's fire came another wave. The trolls, the deniers, the ones who accused Brooklyn of making it about race or mishearing the comment. Still, for every comment that tried to muddy the waters, 10 more demanded accountability. At lunch, students huddled in circles around their phones, playing the video at different volumes. Some looked at Brooklyn with awe, others with unease, as if she were carrying something radioactive, something too honest, too uncomfortable to look at directly. Brooklyn walked through the cafeteria with her tray, her hands steady but her heart full of static. This was what it meant to be seen. Not just for her game, but for the battle she never volunteered to fight. She sat at a table by the window, away from the crowd, where the sun poured in like a spotlight. Claire joined her quietly, eyes scanning the room. "You okay?" Claire asked. Brooklyn paused. "I don't know." Claire didn't push. "People are talking. Like really talking." "I know. They're saying," she hesitated, "that the coach might get fired." Brooklyn let out a soft, disbelieving breath. "Not in this town." Claire looked away. Meanwhile, in the school district office, emails were piling up by the hundreds. Parents, journalists, civil rights advocates. One even came from a local state representative's office, asking if the board was aware of the situation currently escalating online. Principal Harrington sat stiffly at her desk as Superintendent Garrison entered the room, holding a printed transcript of the video's caption. "This isn't just noise," Garrison muttered. "This could blow back on us." Harrington frowned. "We should issue a statement, something neutral. Say we're investigating." "And the coach?" Garrison asked. Harrington hesitated. "He's been here 10 years. Clean record. We can't just throw him under the bus because of one clip with fuzzy audio." "You think the audio's fuzzy?" "There's wind," she said defensively. "It could have distorted the sound." Garrison rubbed his temple. "Or it could be exactly what it sounds like. A racial slur," screamed mid-game. At a student. Neither of them wanted to say it out loud. The district had protected Delaney before. A complaint 2 years ago, about his unfair treatment of black athletes, had been quietly buried in HR paperwork. A former teacher who'd spoken up about his favoritism had been pressured into early retirement. Now everything they'd kept hidden was at risk of exposure. Later that evening, the official school statement dropped. It read, "The district is aware of a video circulating online that alleges inappropriate conduct by a member of our coaching staff. At this time, we are conducting a full review of the footage. However, preliminary analysis suggests the audio is inconclusive and may be affected by external factors such as wind and crowd noise. We ask the public to withhold judgment while we investigate." The message was cold, sanitized. It didn't name Brooklyn. It didn't name the coach. It didn't acknowledge what was said, only what might have been heard. Brooklyn read the statement 3 times. Then she closed her laptop and walked to the backyard where Malcolm was watering the dry winter grass. "They said the audio's inconclusive," she said. Malcolm's hand froze over the hose. "They blamed wind." He turned slowly, his eyes darkening. "They're telling the world their coach doesn't scream slurs, but the wind might." She nodded once. Malcolm set the hose down. That night, civil rights attorney Lena Marsh called Malcolm's phone. She introduced herself calmly but firmly. She had spent 20 years litigating discrimination cases and told Malcolm something he already feared. The school wasn't just dodging blame, it was preparing to protect itself. This is bigger than your daughter, Lena said. It's about the system that trained people like that coach to believe they're untouchable. Then let's touch them, Malcolm replied. The next morning, a new statement emerged. This time from the coach himself. I've dedicated my life to student athletics. I would never use the kind of language I'm accused of. The clip circulating is taken out of context and distorted by crowd noise. I've received threats. My family is being harassed. This isn't justice, it's a witch hunt. He added a carefully chosen line at the end. We must resist the temptation to turn misunderstandings into moments of division. Brooklyn read it in silence, then threw her phone across her bed. A few hours later, the school board held an emergency closed-door meeting. Reporters were kept out. Protesters gathered outside, holding signs that said, "She deserved to play. Erase racism. Not players. Benched because she's black." Malcolm attended the meeting but was denied the right to speak. He sat in the hallway, listening through muffled walls as board members argued over liability, public relations, and potential lawsuits. They didn't mention Brooklyn's name once. But the twist came later that day. Brooklyn was in the middle of fourth period when her homeroom teacher, Mrs. Landry, appeared in the doorway with an envelope in her hand. "Brooklyn," she said gently, "you've been asked to report to the office." The class went silent. Brooklyn stood slowly. She could feel the eyes on her back as she walked out. In the main office, the secretary handed her the envelope. It had the district's seal stamped across the front. Inside was a printed notice, "Student Conduct Warning. To Brooklyn Carter. Subject: disruption of learning environment. It has been brought to our attention that recent events involving public social media posts and external media coverage have caused significant disruption within the learning environment at Madison High School. As a result, we are placing you on a temporary suspension, 3 days, for the following reason: initiating a digital disturbance that violates Student Conduct Code 3, creating unrest through the unauthorized publication of athletic material. This suspension is effective immediately." Brooklyn stood frozen. The world had seen her humiliated, erased, and insulted by her coach, and now, the school had found a way to punish her. When she left the office, the secretary wouldn't meet her eyes. Malcolm was waiting by the school gate in the car. When she opened the door, she sat in silence for a moment, before handing him the paper. He read it once, then again. His face darkened. "They're suspending you," he said quietly. "For going viral." Brooklyn's voice cracked. "For disrupting the environment." He looked out the windshield, jaw clenched tight. "They're trying to flip the narrative," he muttered. "Make you the problem instead of the proof." She nodded, barely breathing. "What do we do now?" she asked. Malcolm didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled his phone from the dashboard and took a photo of the suspension notice. Then he opened his social media app, and he began to type. Malcolm hit post once again, this time exposing the school's retaliation, not just their silence. But within seconds, his inbox floods with a name he doesn't recognize, someone claiming to be an employee inside the school, with something he needs to see. The day after Brooklyn's suspension, the house felt colder, not because of the weather, but because something had shifted inside their walls. A heavy stillness, the kind that followed betrayal. Brooklyn sat at the kitchen table, suspension letter in front of her, hands trembling slightly as she stared at her uneaten toast. Alicia stood at the sink, pretending to rinse dishes she'd already cleaned twice. Malcolm paced the living room, phone clutched in hand, reading and rereading the direct message that had arrived the night before. It had come from a burner account. No name, no picture, just the words.
"They're lying to your face.
Meet me in the parking lot behind the admin building at 4 p.m. I have something you need to see." Malcolm stared at it again, feeling the chill of its simplicity. He didn't know who had sent it, but something in his gut told him this wasn't a prank. He looked at Brooklyn. She hadn't spoken since last night. "You good?" he asked softly. She nodded but didn't look up. Alicia glanced over. "This is breaking her," she whispered. They flipped the story so fast. 1 minute she's the victim, the next she's a distraction. A disruption. "She's not," Malcolm said firmly, "and they're about to learn that." That afternoon, Malcolm didn't go alone. He brought someone with him, Lena Marsh, the civil rights lawyer who'd called 2 days earlier. She met him in the parking lot just before 4 p.m., sharp navy suit, and a briefcase full of fire. "You sure this isn't a setup?" she asked, eyeing the school building.
"No," Malcolm said,
But I'm tired of playing defense. At exactly 4:02, a figure emerged from the rear staff entrance. It was a woman late 40s, glasses, her ID badge turned backward. She wore a windbreaker and moved fast, her face tense with urgency. I only have 5 minutes, she said, not introducing herself. I could lose my job. Who are you? Lena asked. I teach 10th grade English, the woman whispered. I've worked here for 12 years. I've seen what they do to kids who don't fit their mold, especially black kids. They isolate them, label them, then push them out before anyone asks questions. She handed Malcolm a manila envelope. What is it? He asked. Internal emails, meeting notes, screenshots. The assistant coach forwarded them to me months ago by mistake, thinking I was someone else in admin. I saved them. I didn't know what to do until I saw your daughter's video. Malcolm looked down at the envelope, heart pounding. Why now? Because I watched them erase her, the woman said, and I couldn't live with myself if I didn't speak up. She turned to leave, then paused. You didn't get this from me. I was never here. By the time Malcolm looked up, she was gone. He handed the envelope to Lena, who opened it carefully. Inside were over 24 printed emails, including subject lines like, image management, Carter girl causing friction, Coach D feedback, risk to team morale, Brooklyn Carter, college interest, flagged behavior. But one subject line stood out. Limit visibility, internal directive from board. Lena's eyebrows shot up. This is gold. They've been targeting her on purpose, Malcolm said. It's not just Delaney, it's the whole system. Lena nodded grimly. And now we bring it to the hearing. 2 days later, the hearing took place in the district boardroom. It was supposed to be private. A closed-door disciplinary review, with no press, no cameras. But word had already leaked. Protesters gathered outside with signs and chants. Inside, a half-dozen board members sat behind a long oak table, their expressions unreadable. Brooklyn sat between her parents, hands clasped tight. Lena sat beside them, her briefcase resting on her lap like a weapon. Principal Harrington opened the meeting with a formal tone. We're here to discuss the recent disruption caused by Miss Carter's involvement in a social media campaign that has negatively impacted the school environment. Malcolm leaned forward. You mean the campaign where my daughter was called a slur by your coach and then punished for exposing it? Board member Richter, a balding man with a polished tie, interjected. Let's keep this civil, Mr. Carter. Lena opened her briefcase slowly. Then let's be honest, because what you're doing here isn't discipline, it's retaliation. Brooklyn's voice was quiet, but steady. You suspended me because I didn't stay quiet. No, Harrington said quickly. We suspended you because your online actions caused unrest among the student body and faculty. You mean they made people uncomfortable? Malcolm shot back. Good, they should be uncomfortable. Another board member, Ms. Nolan, added. We've also received reports that Brooklyn has shown aggressive behavior in recent weeks, disruptive during practice, confrontational with staff. Brooklyn's eyes widened. Aggressive? I haven't raised my voice once. It's about perception, Nolan replied calmly. Sometimes intensity is misunderstood. Lena tapped the folder on the table. Then, let's talk about perception. Because I have in my hands 24 documents proving your staff coordinated a smear campaign against this student, including language labeling her as a problematic presence and advising coaches to reduce her visibility. The room went still. Harrington's face paled. I don't know what you're referring to. Lena slid the top page forward. Then read it out loud. Silence. Richter cleared his throat. Even if those emails are authentic, they were not officially endorsed. They were sent from district addresses, Lena cut in, which makes them public record. And now that you've admitted they're real, I will be filing an injunction to halt any action against my client. Brooklyn sat frozen, trying to absorb what was happening. For months she'd been treated like she was imagining things. Now, with every word, the mask was being peeled back. Still, the board refused to flinch. We'll review these documents and reconvene at a later date, Harrington said. But for now, the suspension stands. Brooklyn blinked. You just heard the proof. We heard allegations, Nolan corrected. Not conclusions. Lena stood slowly. Then prepare for the consequences. Outside, the crowd had doubled. Chants rang through the air as Brooklyn and her family stepped down the front steps. Reporters rushed forward. Microphones extended. Cameras flashed. Brooklyn, how do you feel about the hearing? Malcolm, what's next for your family? Do you believe the school is covering this up? Brooklyn didn't speak. She couldn't. Her throat tightened, the pressure of so many eyes crushing down on her. But then someone handed her a phone. It was Claire. You need to see this, she said breathlessly. Brooklyn looked down at the screen. A new video. It showed Coach Delaney, not on the field, but in a school hallway. It had been recorded that morning, secretly, from behind a row of lockers. In the footage, he stood speaking to another staff member, unaware of the phone recording him. I'm not backing down, Delaney said. She's got the whole world fooled. But we know what she's like. These people always cry racism when they don't get their way. Brooklyn's mouth fell open. The footage ended there. Malcolm looked at Lena. Can we use that? She was already nodding. Oh, we can use everything. But as they climbed into the car, Brooklyn noticed something strange tucked under the windshield wiper, a folded sheet of paper. She opened it carefully, scanning the handwriting. It wasn't a threat. It was a note, written in block letters. Check the digital folder marked 222 red roster draft in Coach Delaney's work drive. Password is Fury Blue 1. You didn't get this from me. She handed it to Malcolm. His eyes met hers. What do you think it is? She asked. I think, he said quietly. Someone just gave us the kill shot. Brooklyn and Malcolm rush home, open the folder, and find something buried in the draft documents. Something that could bring down not just the coach, but the entire administration. The house was silent when Brooklyn and Malcolm returned. No one spoke as they stepped inside. The air felt electric, heavy with anticipation, taut with tension. Alicia stood in the hallway, arms folded, waiting for them. Well? She asked. What happened? Brooklyn didn't answer. She simply handed her mother the folded note from the windshield. Malcolm was already moving, laptop under his arm, headed for the dining table that had transformed in recent weeks into a war room. Sticky notes, legal pads, USB drives, and folders sprawled across the surface like pieces of a larger truth waiting to be assembled. He opened the laptop, clicked through the school's employee portal, which Brooklyn still had access to thanks to her team login, and found the shared staff drive. 2022 red roster draft. It was there. Password protected. Brooklyn typed in Fury Blue 11. The folder opened. Inside were dozens of files, some spreadsheets, some image folders, and a handful of email threads. Malcolm clicked one marked Roster Strategy, internal only. The first email was dated 2 weeks before the season began. It was from Coach Delaney, addressed to his assistant coaches, and CC'd to Principal Harrington. Let's keep this year's team clean. We've had too many disruptions lately. Keep optics in mind, especially for starters. Remember, parents notice who's representing them. We want a clean, traditional look this season. Malcolm stared at the phrase. He whispered it aloud, bitterly. Clean, traditional. Alicia leaned in, brow furrowed. What does that even mean? Brooklyn, sitting frozen, answered without blinking. White. They clicked through more. A second email, titled Starter Impressions, First Cuts, showed coach notes beside each player's name. Next to Brooklyn's, strong player, aggressive style, too intense, could affect cohesion, risky optics if placed front and center. Next to other players' names, most of them white, reliable, family-oriented, great image, good on camera. One line from the assistant coach read, Carter has potential, but we know how some parents feel about black athletes in leadership roles, especially here. Another email had a blunt, chilling statement. Parents won't like too much black on the field. Let's be smart. Brooklyn covered her mouth. Her breathing grew shallow. Alicia sat down hard, her legs giving out. Malcolm closed the laptop softly, his knuckles white. They didn't just sideline you, he said, voice shaking. They orchestrated it, calculated it, documented it. Brooklyn's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't cry. She clenched her jaw, as if holding every sob in place with sheer will. I worked harder than any of them. We know, Alicia said, taking her hand. No, Brooklyn said quietly. The whole country is about to know. Malcolm didn't waste time. Lena Marsh was on speed dial. When she heard the contents of the emails, her voice flattened with fury. You've just uncovered systemic racism in writing, from multiple staff members, with administrative consent. What do we do? Malcolm asked. We go public, not just social media, national. Within hours, Lena had shared the files with a handful of trusted reporters, ones with reputations for covering racial injustice and education scandals. One in particular, Mia Lockridge, an award-winning journalist for the Washington Sentinel, responded within the hour. Her reply was immediate and direct. Confirm authenticity. I want the exclusive. I'm flying in tomorrow. That night, Malcolm and Alicia sat at the kitchen table, laptops glowing. Brooklyn sat between them, scrolling through the public reactions still erupting online. The school board's email statement denying wrongdoing had only fanned the flames. Now, with screenshots of real internal emails circulating, the internet was reaching a new level of outrage. Public opinion shifted dramatically. People no longer saw Brooklyn as just a high school athlete. They saw her as proof, living, breathing evidence of the quiet violence of systemic exclusion. Hashtags exploded again. Now it wasn't just let Brooklyn play, but Delaney exposed. Too black to start. Systemic sideline. Even local parents who had defended the coach began backpedaling. Some claimed they'd never seen these emails and didn't support this kind of behavior. Others went quiet altogether. But the school? They scrambled. By morning, the district's website had gone into maintenance mode. The staff directory disappeared. Principal Harrington's voicemail inbox was full. Coach Delaney had made his Twitter private, and word spread fast. The district had called an emergency PR consultant. Still, the story had taken on a life of its own. CNN requested comment. So did ESPN. Brooklyn's face appeared on a morning news segment, labeled high school star benched for being black. The Sentinel's reporter Mia Lockridge arrived just after noon the next day. She met the Carters at a small coffee shop across town, away from cameras, in a back booth tucked behind frosted windows. She carried a single notepad and a quiet authority. I don't want a sensationalist piece, she said as soon as they sat. I want the truth, and I want to protect Brooklyn's voice, not twist it. Brooklyn looked at her, cautious but hopeful. What happens if I speak up again? She asked. What if they punish me more? Mia met her gaze. Then I'll make sure every punishment is public record. Every lie they tell will have a headline. You won't be alone anymore. Brooklyn nodded. The interview lasted nearly 2 hours. They talked about everything. The benching, the emails, the culture of silence, the shredded poster, the video, the retaliation. Brooklyn spoke with a calm she didn't know she possessed, but every word burned with restraint, like a fuse waiting for a spark. Mia listened carefully, her pen scratching the page. When they finished, she offered one warning. There's one thing I need to ask, she said gently. The paper wants a photo. And the segment we're pitching, they want a short video interview. Brooklyn blinked. Like, on camera? Yes, but they're requesting something specific. They want you to appear calm, collected, no anger. Malcolm leaned forward. What does that mean? They want her to look strong but not threatening, hurt but not confrontational. They want her to be palatable. Alicia shook her head slowly. They're doing it again. Mia didn't deny it. I know, and I'm fighting it internally. But the producer said they don't want another angry black girl narrative. They think it won't land well. Brooklyn looked down at her hands. Her fists had curled without her realizing. She whispered, So I have to package my pain in a way that makes white people comfortable. Silence. Mia's face softened. You don't have to do anything you don't want. If you want, I'll walk. No story. No, Brooklyn said, lifting her head. Tell it. All of it. Mia nodded. But as she stood to leave, her phone buzzed. She glanced down at the screen. Her eyes widened. Brooklyn, she said quietly. You might want to see this. She turned the screen toward her. A new video had been posted, just seconds old, by a private student account. The caption read, Look who showed up at school today like nothing happened. The video showed Coach Delaney back on school grounds, wearing his team jacket, talking to a group of new students, smiling, laughing, as if none of this had ever happened. Brooklyn stares at the video in disbelief, and her phone buzzes again. This time, it's a direct message from one of Delaney's former players at another school. The message reads, He did this before. I have proof. Do you want it? The next 48 hours unfolded like a storm breaking open in slow motion. The Washington Sentinel published Mia Lockridge's expose late Sunday evening. By Monday morning, Brooklyn's name was everywhere. Her face appeared on homepages, thumbnails, and scrolling tickers beneath televised debates. The emails had ignited national outrage, and for a moment, Brooklyn felt something she hadn't felt since the whole ordeal began. Validation. People finally believed her. but the small window of support closed almost as soon as it opened. The Sentinel article gained traction, but so did something else. A counter-narrative carefully planted by voices who never wanted the truth to surface. Social media threads, anonymous blogs, and strategic commentary began painting Brooklyn not as a victim of systemic racism, but as an overdramatic teenager making trouble for a respected coach. And then the TV networks got involved. The first interview request had seemed straightforward. A morning show wanted Brooklyn to tell her story. They promised fairness, respect, sensitivity. But behind the polite emails and warm-toned camera lights was a hunger, not for justice, but for spectacle. The interview took place in a small studio on the north side of town. Brooklyn sat in a high-backed chair under unforgiving lights. Powder brushed lightly over her skin. A microphone clipped near her collarbone. Malcolm sat beside her, off camera but close enough that she could feel his presence like an anchor. The interviewer, a woman with immaculate hair and a practiced warmth, leaned forward. "Brooklyn," she said gently, "the entire nation has seen your video. Many people are outraged, but others believe the audio wasn't clear. How do you respond to those who think you misinterpreted what your coach said?" Brooklyn inhaled slowly. She had rehearsed this. Her voice remained steady. "I know what I heard," she said. "Words don't lose their meaning just because people are uncomfortable acknowledging them." The interviewer nodded sympathetically, but her next question had a sharp undertone. "Some viewers wonder whether posting the video was appropriate for a student your age. Do you think uploading it contributed to the unrest at your school?" Unrest. The word stung. Brooklyn kept her gaze steady. Speaking up shouldn't be treated like a crime. The interviewer offered a tight smile. "You sound very passionate. Some critics say you're too outspoken. That maybe you come across as confrontational. What would you say to that?" Confrontational. There it was again, that subtle rebranding of truth into aggression. Brooklyn's throat tightened. "I'm not confrontational. I'm tired." The interviewer blinked, momentarily thrown. "Tired? Tired of working twice as hard to be seen half as much," Brooklyn said. "Tired of pretending I don't notice the things people hope I'm too scared to say out loud." It was a raw, vulnerable moment. The studio crew froze. One cameraman swallowed hard. Malcolm felt something tighten in his chest. Pride mixed with fear. After the interview, the host shook Brooklyn's hand politely, thanked her for her honesty, and promised to handle the story with care. But by evening, the segment aired heavily edited. Gone were Brooklyn's strongest lines. Gone were her measured explanations. Gone was her quiet strength. Instead, the network cut her words into sharp, incomplete pieces that made her seem defensive, even angry. The lower third caption read, "Brooklyn Carter, too proud, too loud." Malcolm's fists clenched as he watched the broadcast from their living room. "They twisted you," he muttered. "They turned your truth into ammunition." Alicia muted the TV. "Baby," she said softly, "don't take this inside you. That's what they want." But the damage had begun. By the next day, pundits across networks were debating her character, not her experience. Not the racism. Not the emails. Her. One commentator on a conservative panel sneered. "This girl seems like she wants attention more than fairness. Kids make mistakes every day. Why destroy a man's career over a misheard comment?" Another chimed in. Her tone was uncoachable. You can tell she was trouble from the start. The word repeated on nearly every channel. Divisive. The sponsors for her travel league quietly emailed that they were reevaluating partnerships with all players involved in media controversies. Her name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't have to be. Colleges that once showed interest suddenly went silent. Emails that had arrived with enthusiasm now ended with phrases like, "given recent publicity and further review needed." Everywhere she looked, doors that had been barely open were now closing in her face. Brooklyn's phone buzzed non-stop. Some messages were supportive, but many weren't. "You're ruining your team. Stop playing the race card. Coach Delaney has been here longer than you've been alive." One message chilled her. "You people always make drama." She didn't show Malcolm that one. She didn't need to. He saw the way she stared at her phone, jaw trembling but locked. He saw her pull her knees into her chest on the couch, a habit from childhood she rarely slipped back into. He saw the quiet devastation under the surface, the kind that didn't scream but sank like a weight too heavy for a 17-year-old to hold. That night she whispered to him, voice breaking, "Why don't they want to hear me?" Malcolm pulled her into a hug. "They hear you. They just don't want to admit what your voice reveals." She didn't cry. She couldn't. Instead, she buried her face into his shoulder and let silence speak for her. The next morning brought a new wave of coverage. A well-known opinion columnist published a piece titled, "Is Brooklyn Carter Tearing Her Community Apart?" In it, he compared her to activists who pushed too hard, claiming she lacked humility, respect, and perspective. He referred to her as volatile 3 times. The backlash almost overshadowed a smaller headline that broke midday. Coach Delaney, innocent man or victim of digital harassment. The article quoted a statement from Delaney himself. "Brooklyn Carter has misrepresented my actions, damaged my reputation, and launched a public attack that is hurting my family. I've given decades to this school. She has given nothing but disruption. Nothing but disruption." Brooklyn read the sentence again and again until the words blurred. Late that night, while Brooklyn slept restlessly on the couch, Malcolm sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone as it vibrated steadily with alerts. Then one message appeared from a number he didn't recognize. It read, "You're about to receive something from a law office. Don't panic, read it carefully." Seconds later, an email appeared in his inbox, formally formatted, stamped with digital certification. Malcolm clicked it open. At the top were the words, "Intent to sue defamation claim. Filed by Coach Richard Delaney, plaintiff, the Malcolm Carter, defendant." Malcolm's stomach dropped. He scrolled through the document, reading phrases that felt like punches: irreparable harm to reputation, false accusations amplified for public attention, emotional distress inflicted upon the plaintiff's family, request for monetary compensation and injunction. He stopped breathing for a moment. When Alicia entered the kitchen, she saw him frozen, face drained of color. "What is it?" she whispered. He turned the laptop toward her. Alicia's hand flew to her mouth. "He's suing you for defamation," Malcolm said. "He's claiming I ruined his life." At that moment, footsteps approached. Brooklyn stood at the doorway, hair messy from sleep, eyes heavy. She saw their faces. She saw the document. She saw the truth. Her voice was barely audible. Is he coming after you now?"
Malcolm swallowed hard. "Yeah, baby. Yes."
Brooklyn took a step back, as if the floor had tilted under her. She whispered, "But I'm the one he hurt." Malcolm exhaled, eyes burning with a fury he couldn't contain. "And now he wants to make us the criminals." The house fell silent. Outside, the world was spinning out of control, but inside, something tight and unbreakable formed in the quiet between them. This wasn't just a battle for justice anymore. It was war. Before Malcolm can call Lena, a harsh knock echoes through the house. When he opens the door, a court courier stands on the porch, holding a second envelope, one addressed not to Malcolm, but to Brooklyn. The envelope addressed to Brooklyn lay on the kitchen table like a bruise, dark, heavy, and impossible to ignore. Malcolm stared at it, as if opening it might unleash something irreversible. In a way, it already had. The lawsuit against him was a direct strike, but this felt personal in a different way. It felt like a weapon aimed at the quietest part of Brooklyn's heart, the part that still believed adults should protect children, not target them. When she finally unfolded the paperwork, her hands trembled. It wasn't a lawsuit. Not yet. It was a court summons. She was listed as a potential witness in Delaney's defamation suit against Malcolm. Not a victim. A witness. They were pulling her into the courtroom, not as someone harmed, but as someone who might be pressured, twisted, or silenced. Brooklyn sank into the nearest chair, staring at the letter's rigid language. "Why are they doing this?" she whispered. "Why drag me into a case about him lying?" "Because they're counting on fear," Lena said when Malcolm sent her a photo of the summons. "They hope you'll fall apart or that your testimony can be manipulated to show inconsistencies. It's a classic tactic." "Can they force her to testify?" Malcolm asked. "Yes," Lena said bluntly, "but they can't force her to lie, and they definitely can't force us to stay silent." The next week moved with a strange, dreamlike heaviness. As the court date approached, protesters doubled outside the school board building. Some came with homemade signs, others with megaphones, a few with nothing except anger and solidarity. Local news vans lined the street. But online, the narrative had twisted further. Influencers who once defended Brooklyn turned their attention to other trending topics. Comment sections filled with new accusations that Malcolm had fabricated the story for attention. Anonymous accounts claimed the emails were edited. Even some parents at the school began parroting lines that felt lifted straight from the coach's legal filings. The pressure built, until the morning of the hearing arrived. The courthouse exterior was beige stone, weathered and cracked, a building that looked exhausted from decades of holding other people's secrets. But inside it felt sterile, conversation reduced to whispers, footsteps echoing like warnings. Brooklyn walked beside Malcolm and Alicia, her breath shallow with nerves. She wore a simple black blouse and slacks, neat, understated, deliberately neutral. Everyone had opinions about how a black girl should present herself in a courtroom. Today, she refused to give them ammunition. Lena Marsh strode ahead, confident and sharp, her heels tapping like a metronome of purpose. When they entered the courtroom, Malcolm's heart dropped. The jury box was nearly full: 8 white jurors, 1 Latino juror, 1 black juror. 11 people who would decide whether Malcolm's fight for his daughter was bravery or defamation. Brooklyn scanned their faces. Some offered polite, brittle smiles. Others avoided eye contact. The black juror, a woman in her 30s, gave Brooklyn the smallest nod, a gesture of recognition so subtle, only someone who needed hope as badly as she did would catch it. On the opposite side of the room, Coach Delaney sat beside his legal team. He looked smaller than he had before, not physically, but in presence. Yet he carried an aura of controlled indignation, a man determined to reclaim the narrative. His attorney, a tall man with silver hair and a voice that cut like cold steel, rose first. "We are here," he announced to the jury, "because a respected coach, a husband and father, has had his reputation destroyed by a baseless accusation and a social media smear campaign, orchestrated by Mr. Carter." Malcolm exhaled sharply, but Lena placed a hand on his arm. The attorney continued, "My client has dedicated nearly 2 decades to student athletes. He has no history of misconduct, yet one ambiguous video with unclear audio has been weaponized to ruin his life." He looked directly at Brooklyn. "And who suffers when adults lie?" he asked rhetorically. "Children, students, the community." The irony twisted like a blade. When Lena took the floor, she did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. "This isn't about social media," she began. "This is about a pattern of racism, silencing, and institutional cover-up." She handed packets to the jury. "These are emails," she said, "internal communications sent by the coaching staff and administrative officials. In them they discuss keeping the team clean, managing optics, and most disturbing, limiting black visibility on the field." The jurors flipped through the documents. Some winced, some stiffened. One murmured, "My God." But instead of addressing their behavior, Lena continued, "The school retaliated against the student they harmed. And when her father defended her, they retaliated against him too." She turned to Delaney. "Racism rarely screams. It whispers. It hides in coded language. But sometimes the mask slips." Delaney shifted in his seat. The judge called for the first witness. To Malcolm's surprise, Delaney himself took the stand first. His performance was precise, measured, practiced. "I never said what they claim I said," he insisted. "The audio is distorted. People hear what they want to hear." "And the emails?" Lena asked, on cross-examination. Delaney's expression tightened. "Taken out of context." "What context explains saying parents wouldn't like too much black on the field?" Lena asked. Delaney hesitated. "A draft phrase. Never meant to go out." "Poor wording." "Poor wording," Lena repeated flatly. "Or clear bias." The judge interrupted. "Ms. Marsh, stay within questioning parameters." The interruptions continued each time Lena pressed the issue. Small cuts, subtle rebalancing of power. By midday, Malcolm was called to the stand. Delaney's attorney moved with predatory precision. "Mr. Carter," he began, "would you describe yourself as an emotional man?" Malcolm frowned. "I described myself as a father. But you became angry, didn't you?" "I became protective. Is it true you threatened the coach?" "I told him I wanted answers," Malcolm said, "not excuses." The attorney paced slowly. "Is it possible, Mr. Carter, that you overreacted? That your passion for your daughter blinded you to the truth?" Malcolm's voice deepened. "You think I imagined a slur? Or imagined the emails your client wrote?" "We dispute the authenticity of those emails," the attorney replied smoothly. Lena shot up. "Objection. Those documents have been verified." "Sustained," the judge said, but his tone lacked conviction. Malcolm stepped down from the stand, feeling scraped raw. Every answer he gave felt like a battle against a narrative already half-written. Then it was Brooklyn's turn. She approached the witness stand as if carrying invisible weight. The courtroom quieted. Delaney's attorney smiled politely, though it didn't reach his eyes. Miss Carter, he began softly. You're 17. A minor. Scared, I imagine. Overwhelmed. Brooklyn met his gaze. No more than anyone else here. A flicker of irritation flashed across his face. You claim you heard my client use defamatory language, correct?
I didn't claim it, she said. I heard it.
Is it possible, he said smoothly, that adrenaline affected your perception? That the noise of the game distorted your memory? Brooklyn inhaled slowly. I didn't imagine the hurt on my father's face when he saw the video. I didn't imagine the comments about too much black on the field. And I didn't imagine being benched for being myself. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Before the attorney could respond, Lena rose. I have no questions. The judge called for a short recess. Malcolm hugged Brooklyn, whispering, You were perfect. But she didn't feel perfect. She felt exposed. When they returned, the judge cleared his throat. We will now call one final witness, he said. A witness requested by the plaintiff. Delaney's attorney stood. We'd like to call Claire Jennings. Brooklyn stiffened. Claire? Her former teammate? From the back of the courtroom, Claire walked forward slowly, eyes wide, hands trembling. Brooklyn's stomach dropped. She had no idea which side Claire had come to support, and neither did Malcolm. Claire takes the stand, glancing nervously between the judge, the coach, and Brooklyn. Then says, I saw something the team was never supposed to see. Claire Jennings looked like she might collapse before she reached the witness stand. Her hands trembled as she took the oath. Her blonde hair, usually pulled into a confident ponytail during games, hung loose around her shoulders as if she couldn't quite hold herself together. She refused to look at the coach. She refused to look at the audience. For a long moment, she didn't even look at Brooklyn. Only when she sat down did she finally lift her eyes. And the moment she did, Brooklyn felt something heavy shift between them. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was readiness. Delaney's attorney approached slowly, wearing the same polite mask he'd used on Brooklyn. Miss Jennings, he began. Thank you for being here. I understand this is difficult. So let me start simple. How long have you played on the soccer team? 3 years, Claire said softly. And in that time, did you ever witness Coach Delaney behaving inappropriately toward Brooklyn Carter? Claire's breath hitched. Yes. A faint murmur rippled through the courtroom. The attorney blinked, thrown off balance for the first time. I see. And what exactly did you witness? Claire swallowed hard. Bias, favoritism, and instructions. Instructions? The attorney repeated. Claire nodded slowly. He told us things we weren't supposed to repeat. The attorney's voice sharpened. Miss Jennings, are you aware you're under oath? Yes, Claire whispered. Then let me ask again. Are you claiming that Coach Delaney instructed players to treat Brooklyn differently? No, Claire said. Then she lifted her chin. I'm saying he instructed us to not treat her at all. A gasp tore through the room. Delaney shifted violently in his seat. His attorney raised a hand urgently. Miss Jennings, that is a very serious allegation. You must provide clarity. Claire straightened, as if steeling herself. During practice last fall, she said, Coach Delaney gathered the forwards. He told us that this is exactly what he said. Brooklyn is talented, but she's not the image we want for recruitment season. Keep the ball with our core players. Don't pass to her unless absolutely necessary. Silence dropped like a stone. The attorney's face went rigid. Miss Jennings. But Claire wasn't done. He told midfielders the same thing, she continued. And the defenders. He told us to freeze her out. Said recruiters look for faces that make the school comfortable. And that too much flash from one player could send the wrong message.
Brooklyn inhaled sharply.
Flash. Wrong message. Clean. Traditional. She had heard these coded phrases before, but never spoken this plainly. Malcolm leaned forward, every muscle tense. The attorney cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Miss Jennings, were you aware that your coach's reputation is on the line today? Claire's eyes flashed. So is Brooklyn's life. The attorney stepped closer. Is it possible you misunderstood?
No, Claire said. I didn't misunderstand, I ignored it.
That's what I'm ashamed of. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. Every time Brooklyn made a play, he undermined her. Every time she outshined someone else, he told us not to feed her ego. Every time she pushed harder, he said she was trying too hard. He changed statistics in post-practice reports. He told us to stick to a strategy where Brooklyn wasn't a factor. Brooklyn stared at Claire, shocked. She knew there had been sabotage, but never imagined her teammates had been explicitly instructed to exclude her. Claire kept talking, voice steadying now, as if truth gave her courage. Once, when Brooklyn wasn't around, he told us, recruiters like consistency. They don't want uncertainty. And a girl like Brooklyn draws the wrong kind of attention. Journalists in the gallery began typing frantically. Delaney's attorney tried to interrupt, but Claire raised her voice. And he said something else. Something I've never forgotten. The courtroom hushed again. Claire stared straight at the jury. He told us parents won't like too much black on the field. A collective gasp swept through the room like a tidal wave. Even the judge's eyebrows jerked upward, though he quickly masked his reaction. Cameras, though banned, might as well have been flashing in every eye in the crowd. Reporters scribbled at lightning speed. Someone in the audience whispered, "Oh my God." The attorney's face flushed crimson. "Miss Jennings," he snapped, "that statement is inflammatory." "It's the truth," Claire said firmly. "And you asked me a question. Under oath. Do you have any proof?" "No written proof," Claire said, trembling again. But the whole team heard it. We all did. A ripple of shame crossed her expression. And none of us stood up to him. Because we were scared. Because he controlled our playtime. Because he controlled our reputations. Because he made us feel like speaking up would make us the problem. Malcolm felt his throat tighten. This wasn't just Claire exposing Delaney. It was her confessing her own complicity. The attorney regrouped, voice cold. "Miss Jennings, you are clearly emotional. Are you sure your memory isn't—" "No," Claire cut in. "I'm not confused. I'm not emotional. I'm telling the truth because I was part of the problem, and I'm done being scared." The judge finally intervened. "Mr. Avery, the witness has answered your question." The attorney stepped back reluctantly, jaw tight. When Lena rose for cross-examination, she approached Claire gently. "Thank you for your courage," she began quietly. Claire blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Lena asked only one question. "Claire, in your personal opinion, did Coach Delaney bench Brooklyn because of her ability?" "No," Claire whispered. "He benched her because of her identity." The courtroom shook with noise again. The judge called for order, banging his gavel until the chaos settled. Delaney sat rigidly, eyes burning with something between rage and fear. His attorney leaned in, whispering furiously, but nothing could undo what had been said. Brooklyn sat frozen, her heart pounding like a drum in her ears. She had imagined justice for months, but she hadn't imagined hearing truth delivered so bluntly, so publicly, so clearly. Claire stepped down, shoulders trembling. Before she left the stand area, she met Brooklyn's eyes, and in that single moment, apology and bravery intertwined. Brooklyn nodded, a small soft acknowledgement that didn't erase the past, but honored the present. Then the judge cleared his throat. "Ms. Marsh," he said to Lena, "you may present your next piece of evidence." Lena stood slowly. Her face was unreadable. Her voice was calm, but the entire courtroom leaned forward as she reached for her briefcase. Because from it she pulled a sealed folder, thick, labeled with a red stripe. "Stamp confidential. Internal bias audit. Do not release." Brooklyn's breath caught. Malcolm froze. Even the judge shifted in his seat. "What is that?" the attorney demanded. "A document your client hoped would never see daylight," Lena said. The attorney stepped forward. "Your Honor, we object." The judge raised a hand. "I'll decide that once I see it." Lena placed the sealed folder on the evidence podium, with a soft thud that echoed like a hammer falling on stone. Inside this folder, she knew, were documented complaints spanning years, records of bias reports, parent statements, internal notes, all quietly shelved by the administration. Everything the school tried to bury. Everything the district hoped would stay hidden. Everything that could destroy Coach Delaney's defense in a single blow. The courtroom held its breath. Every eye locked onto the sealed folder. Every whisper died. Even Delaney looked pale now. Brooklyn felt her pulse racing so hard she thought she might faint. Lena rested her fingertips lightly on the folder and looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor," she said, "this audit contains patterns of discrimination that extend far beyond my client. And once you read it, nothing about this case will look the same." The judge reaches for the folder, but before he can open it, a bailiff enters urgently and hands him a note. His face drains of color as he reads it. He looks up and says, "Court will recess immediately. There has been a development involving the school district." The judge's face went slack as he read the urgent note handed to him by the bailiff. His eyes scanned the page quickly, then again slower this time, as if his brain couldn't process what it was seeing. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice hollow, this court will recess immediately. Murmurs exploded. He banged the gavel hard, cutting through the noise. Now, bailiff, clear the room. Lena stepped forward. Your Honor, may we know the nature of the development? The judge hesitated, then said, what no one expected. There's been a leak of a confidential district report. Apparently it's now in the hands of the press. Brooklyn's heart skipped. Malcolm shot a glance at Lena, but she looked just as stunned. What report? Lena asked slowly. The judge didn't answer directly. The superintendent has requested an emergency review and has asked that no further evidence be introduced until clarification is obtained. Delaney's attorney leapt on it. We ask that all proceedings be paused indefinitely pending review. No. The judge snapped, the first crack of frustration breaking through his carefully neutral mask. Recess, not adjournment. The courtroom emptied in minutes, but the tension didn't drain with the people. Outside, the hall buzzed with confusion. Reporters were already glued to their phones, typing furiously, scanning news alerts. One journalist gasped and said aloud, "Oh my God, look at this." Malcolm moved closer. It was an article just published on an independent education watchdog site. The headline was brutal, exclusive. Suppressed district audit shows racism built into athletic system. Below it, a copy of the very document Lena had just tried to submit into evidence. Scanned, uploaded, highlighted. Brooklyn blinked at the screen. It's out? Lena's lips parted. It was sealed. I didn't leak it, Malcolm said. I didn't either, Lena replied. But her voice was already calculating, mind racing. Which means someone else had it too. Someone on the inside. The article laid it all out. Data from a district-wide internal audit conducted the year prior. Quietly commissioned, quietly completed, and very deliberately hidden. The numbers were staggering. Black student athletes were benched 73% more frequently than white teammates of equal or lesser performance metrics. Disciplinary actions against black athletes were 2.6x more likely to be labeled as attitude-related versus developmental coaching. Coaching evaluations across schools used subjective language, like too aggressive, uncoachable, and overconfident, overwhelmingly, in reference to black players. Recruitment exposure provided to white athletes outpaced access for black athletes by a ratio of 5. And perhaps most damning, at the bottom of the last page, was a recommendation box. Suggested response: internal review, retraining, and phased staffing realignment. Actual outcome: no further action taken. It was dated 11 months ago. Alicia gasped as she read it, one hand clutching Brooklyn's wrist. They knew. The board knew. Brooklyn felt like the air had been knocked from her lungs. It wasn't just about Delaney. It never had been. He was the face, but the foundation had always been rotten. This was the playbook, Malcolm whispered. Lena's eyes were sharp now, and they buried it, because exposing it would have meant lawsuits, protests, media fallout, funding loss. So they protected themselves and sacrificed students like Brooklyn. Within an hour, the report had spread beyond watchdog sites. Major outlets picked it up, reprinting key excerpts. A segment aired live on regional news, quoting the 73% bench rate and flashing Brooklyn's photo beside it. Over the phrase, "Data confirms systemic targeting of black athletes," Malcolm's phone lit up non-stop. Calls, voicemails, emails. A senior producer from a national morning show reached out. "We'd like Brooklyn to speak live tomorrow." This has become a national story. A civil rights organization messaged Lena, offering resources, public advocacy, and legal support. And then, a new message came through from a source neither Lena nor Malcolm recognized. It was a formal press release from the State Department of Education. It read, "In light of recent revelations stemming from a leaked internal audit, the state is opening a formal civil rights investigation into the Madison Unified School District. This will include evaluation of discriminatory practices, retaliation against students, and misuse of administrative authority." Brooklyn read it twice, then looked up at her father. "They're investigating the whole district," she said. Malcolm stared at the screen, in disbelief. "You started something bigger than any of us imagined." But even as a crack of hope opened, a familiar fear returned. Delaney was still free. The lawsuit still stood. Brooklyn's name still appeared in the middle of every headline, with none of the protection adults in her position were supposed to have. When court resumed the following day, everything had changed. But the tension hadn't. The judge sat with the report now printed on his desk. "I have reviewed the documents that have unfortunately reached the public domain," he said carefully. "While their unauthorized release is highly irregular, the content cannot be ignored." Delaney's attorney immediately objected. "Your Honor, the leak compromises the integrity of this trial. It illuminates it," Lena countered, standing. "Your client's conduct wasn't isolated. It was symptomatic of a structure that deliberately pushed students like my client's daughter to the margins." The judge looked weary. "This trial is now part of a much larger conversation, one that will extend beyond these walls." Claire Jennings returned to the courtroom that day, on her own. She wasn't required to, but she sat in the audience, silent, watching everything. Brooklyn noticed her immediately. At one point their eyes met, and for the first time since this began, Claire mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Brooklyn's throat tightened. She gave the smallest nod back, but the most unexpected twist came just before the lunch recess. The bailiff approached the judge once again. Another note. The judge read it. His lips pursed. "This trial may be impacted further by new developments," he said cryptically. "We'll break until this afternoon." Malcolm leaned into Lena. "What now?" She checked her phone and found the answer waiting in her inbox. A whistleblower, anonymous, but verified, had submitted a digital folder to the State Education Board. Inside were audio files, private conversations, staff meetings. One in particular had a title that made Lena go still. "Delaney Bias Meeting, Fall Term." She clicked it. A voice unmistakably Delaney's spoke clearly. "We need to be careful this season. We've got some heat from equity groups, but don't panic. Just rotate the optics. Use 1 or 2 minority players during recruitment events. Keep the rest off radar. We're not changing our culture because of pressure." Another voice, Principal Harrington's, laughed softly in the background. Brooklyn stood motionless beside Lena, her pulse thundering in her ears. "They were coordinating it," she whispered. Lena stared at the file. They weren't just tolerating bias. They were engineering it. Outside the courthouse, a protest was building. Word of the audio leak had already reached the public. Teachers, parents, former students, all carrying signs now. How many were benched? Who else got buried? Not one more, Brooklyn. Reporters scrambled to adjust headlines mid-broadcast. Inside, the courtroom trembled with a truth that could no longer be contained. As the next session begins, the State Education Commissioner enters the courtroom in person, unexpected and unannounced, and walks directly to the bench. She hands the judge an official order. The entire school board is now under investigation for civil rights violations. The entrance of the State Education Commissioner into the courtroom changed everything. Her presence radiated authority that cut through tension sharper than any gavel. As she handed the judge the official investigation order, a hush swept through the room, a quiet so deep even the fluorescent lights seemed to dim. "This order," the judge announced, holding the document carefully, "indicates that the Madison Unified School District is now formally under statewide investigation for potential civil rights violations." The courtroom gasped. Delaney's attorney stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "So is an entire district concealing a racism audit," the judge replied, not bothering to hide his irritation. But the ripple of shock extended far beyond this moment. Because investigations didn't begin with headlines. They began with history. And the deeper state investigators dug into Coach Delaney's past, the more rot they uncovered. The next week unfolded like a slow avalanche, each new revelation tumbling over the last, accelerating unstoppable. Brooklyn sat at home with her laptop open, constantly refreshing the newsfeed. Malcolm paced the living room. Alicia kept her phone charged and nearby at all times. Lena checked court updates every hour. The world felt suspended, the ground shifting beneath them with each breaking update. On Wednesday morning, the state released its preliminary findings to the judge. It hit the courthouse like a lightning strike. His report summary began innocently enough. Upon review of personnel records, recommendation letters, and interdistrict communication, discrepancies were noted. But then the wording changed. Coach Richard Delaney was previously employed at Jefferson Ridge High School until 2016. Official documentation lists his departure as a voluntary transition due to cultural mismatch. Cultural mismatch. Lena's eyebrows shot upward as she read the phrasing. "They used that term deliberately," she said. "It's sanitized language. A cover." Brooklyn frowned. "A cover for what?" The judge kept reading. Further inquiry revealed a disciplinary file withheld from the receiving district during his transfer. Said file contained multiple complaints from students and parents, specifically citing Delaney for cultural insensitivity, racially charged remarks, and inappropriate conditioning expectations placed disproportionately on black athletes. Malcolm's jaw tightened. They buried his past. No, Lena said quietly. They exported it. The report continued. Coaching staff and administration at Jefferson Ridge negotiated a quiet transfer, promising not to disclose the incidents if Delaney resigned. This agreement was not shared with the hiring board at Madison Unified, violating state transparency requirements. Brooklyn felt sick, so he hurt people before me, she whispered, and instead of stopping him, they passed him on to us. Malcolm rubbed her back gently. This isn't your fault. But Brooklyn shook her head. He didn't just wake up one day like this. He practiced it. He perfected. Lena nodded. Predators aren't born, they're permitted. More findings followed. At Delaney's former school, 3 black athletes had lodged formal complaints. They reported things almost identical to what Brooklyn experienced. Being benched, despite superior performance. Being disciplined more harshly. Being called aggressive or unrefined. Being excluded from recruitment events. One complaint contained a chilling quote, attributed to Delaney. You need to tone yourself down if you want to look marketable. Another, coaches want confidence, not attitude. A third, we want a traditional-looking team. Traditional again. Brooklyn's stomach twisted. They let him do this for years, she said bitterly. And not just here. Then came the unexpected twist. The state revealed that Jefferson Ridge had faced pressure from a civil rights advocacy group 7 years earlier. The school avoided a lawsuit by privately agreeing to transition the coach out. Transition, Lena muttered. Corporate language for will make him someone else's problem. Malcolm threw his hands up. So our district hired him blind. No, Lena said darkly. They didn't know because they didn't want to know. They saw his clean file and asked no questions. Brooklyn scanned the report again. Why didn't the old players ever speak up publicly? Lena sighed. They did, Brooke. But no one listened. They weren't believed. They weren't amplified. They weren't you. The words landed heavily. It wasn't comfort, it was truth. By Thursday, the news had gone national. Again. Cable networks ran the story under banners like, Coach's past reveals pattern of racism. Schools passing along problem coaches. A hidden epidemic. Internal audit prior complaints explosive findings. One commentator spoke bluntly during a live segment. This isn't just about one coach. It's about institutions that recycle racism, instead of rooting it out. Brooklyn watched, her heart pounding, her emotions tangled. Vindication, sadness, rage, exhaustion. The more the world uncovered, the heavier she felt. Because every revelation wasn't just a new fact. It was another confirmation that her suffering had been engineered, not accidental. And yet, something strange happened in the midst of the chaos. People started defending her in new ways. Not just activists, not just students, but strangers, random parents, former coaches, ex-athletes from different states, stepping forward to say, we see her. We believe her. This is what the system has always done. On Friday, the state announced their next step. A full investigative task force would be assigned to the district for the remainder of the year. Every coach, every principal, every board member, every disciplinary record, every recruitment file, all under scrutiny. When the commissioner visited the courthouse again to brief the judge, her voice carried the gravity of someone who understood this wasn't just a scandal, it was a reckoning. This district is not the first to hide a report like this, she said quietly, but it will be the first one we dismantle publicly. Malcolm exhaled, a deep, shaky breath that had been sitting in his chest for months. Brooklyn stayed silent. After the hearing that day, she walked alone to the steps outside the courthouse. She needed air, real air, not courtroom oxygen that felt recycled and thin. She sat on the cold stone steps, leaning forward, elbows on her knees. Her phone buzzed beside her. She ignored it. Another buzz. Then 3 more. Finally, she picked it up, assuming it was news updates or supportive comments. But it wasn't. It was an email. Subject line, D1 scholarship interest. Immediate response requested. Brooklyn frowned, confused. Colleges had been avoiding her like she carried a public relations virus. She opened the email. It was from Carson University, a top-tier Division I school with one of the strongest women's soccer programs in the country. It read, Brooklyn, We've been following your case closely. We see your strength, we see your resilience, and we believe you deserve a platform where your talent, not your silence, is valued. We would like to formally offer you a full athletic scholarship to join our women's soccer roster next season. If you're willing, we'd also like to feature your story in an upcoming campaign highlighting equity in athletics. Let us know how soon you can meet. Brooklyn stared at the screen. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Was this real? Or was it a school trying to ride the wave of publicity? Was it recognition or exploitation? Malcolm approached slowly from behind. What is it? He asked gently. Brooklyn handed him the phone without a word. He read it. His eyes widened. That's huge, he said softly. But Brooklyn didn't smile. She whispered, do they want me or the story? Before Malcolm could answer, a new email alert popped up. It was from the university again. A second message. Shorter, sharper, more urgent. Brooklyn, please check the attached file. There is something you need to know before you respond. She opened the attachment, and the second she saw what it contained, her breath caught, her hands trembled. Her entire world narrowed to a pinpoint. Whatever she expected, this wasn't it. The attachment reveals a disturbing connection between Coach Delaney and Carson University's athletic department. One that makes the scholarship offer far more complicated than it appears. Brooklyn stared at the screen, her stomach tightening as she opened the attachment from Carson University. She expected a recruiting form, maybe a press kit, but what loaded was a PDF labeled Personnel Disclosure, Historical Affiliation. At first it didn't make sense. The document listed advisory board members, coaching consultants, and visiting athletic evaluators over the past 5 years. Most were unfamiliar, until one name stopped her cold. Richard Delaney. Next to it, unofficial recruiting consultant, women's soccer program, summer clinics. Brooklyn's breath hitched. Her eyes scanned the entry again, and again, hoping she misread it. But it was there, clear as print, indifferent as fact. Malcolm leaned in behind her, confusion blooming into alarm. They had him on staff? Not full staff, Brooklyn whispered, but connected, informally. He leaned over the desk and scrolled to the bottom of the document. Another section read, due to local concerns, Mr. Delaney's participation was discontinued prior to fall 2021. No formal announcement was made. Alicia walked into the room with folded laundry in her hands, and paused when she saw their faces. What is it now? She asked, already bracing. Brooklyn slowly turned the screen toward her. Alicia's jaw clenched. That school knew him. Brooklyn sat back in her chair, the weight of the offer crashing into something dark beneath the surface. What she had first seen as hope now felt like a trap wrapped in ribbon. So this isn't about redemption, she said slowly. It's about reputation. That night, she lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, playing every scene from the past months in her mind, like a broken reel. The games she didn't play, the humiliation, the interview backlash, the courtroom, the emails, Claire's testimony, the scholarship. The recruiter's message from Carson had been so polished, so perfectly timed, and now she couldn't unsee the timing for what it was. Opportunistic. She scrolled through her email again, this time reading the recruiter's original words with new eyes. We want to be on the right side of history, Brooklyn whispered to herself, or the winning side of public opinion. She didn't sleep. The next morning, Malcolm stood at the kitchen window, holding his coffee mug tightly. He hadn't touched it in 20 minutes. She deserves better, he finally said. Alicia nodded. But how do we define better anymore? It's all tainted. Every offer will come with agendas now. Brooklyn walked in quietly, hair pulled back, eyes puffy but clear. I want to talk to the recruiter, she said. Directly. No email. I want to see their face when they explain this. Lena set up a video call that afternoon. The recruiter, a clean-cut woman in her 30s named Jessica Raines, joined the Zoom call with a warm smile that felt overly rehearsed. Brooklyn, she said, we're so honored to even be considered in your decision-making process. Brooklyn didn't return the smile. Did you know about Delaney? Jessica's smile faltered. I was aware he consulted on past summer clinics, yes. Did you think I wouldn't find that out? Jessica hesitated. It's not part of our current staff, and once concerns were raised in his district, we removed him from all advisory roles. Why didn't you mention it in your first message? Malcolm cut in. Jessica's voice softened. Because we didn't want to lose the opportunity to support Brooklyn. The truth is, our program wants to be part of building the solution. Alicia folded her arms. Sounds more like cleaning up the past. Jessica nodded, carefully. Maybe both. But Brooklyn, your resilience, your leadership, it means something. We want you not just for your story, but for your skill. Brooklyn tilted her head. Would you have recruited me before the media? Jessica didn't answer right away. Honestly, maybe not. Not because you weren't qualified, but because we weren't looking close enough. There was a beat of silence, and for the first time, Brooklyn saw something raw in the recruiter's face. Shame, or maybe something like it. Jessica continued, her voice quieter now. We missed you before. We're not proud of that. But we're here now. You don't owe us anything. But we're extending this offer with sincerity. Brooklyn nodded once. I'll think about it, she said, then ended the call. Later that evening, she walked through the neighborhood with Malcolm. The sky was heavy with winter clouds. They didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. Finally, Malcolm asked, Do you want to go? Brooklyn kicked a loose stone into the curb. I don't know, part of me wants to say no, just to prove I don't need their charity. It's not charity, he said. It's leverage. If you go, you take up space. You become the story they didn't expect to carry. You make them confront what they tried to ignore. Brooklyn looked up at him. And if I don't go? Then you still win, Malcolm said. Because you chose, not them. Back home, Alicia was folding mail into neat stacks when her hand froze mid-motion. There was a small envelope with no return address. Thick, yellowed, taped shut. She opened it cautiously. Inside were 3 printed photographs and a handwritten note. She read the first line and immediately called Malcolm. He and Brooklyn rushed in. Alicia handed the note over, without a word. It read, Shut it down. She's not special. We're watching. The photographs were of Brooklyn. At school. At practice. Walking home. One was taken from behind, another through a window. All clearly without her knowing. Brooklyn's breath caught in her throat. Alicia pressed a hand over her mouth. Malcolm's expression darkened as he picked up the envelope and looked at the postmark. This was dropped off by hand. Brooklyn stepped backward, as if the air itself had betrayed her. They're watching me? Lena came over within the hour. She took photos of the threat, made calls, contacted authorities. The timing isn't random, she said. You're in the news again. The story's gaining traction. That's when the hate mail comes. The threats. They want fear to be your silence. Brooklyn shook her head. It's not working. But her voice shook when she said it. That night, Malcolm installed new security cameras, reinforced the door locks, alerted the police, though they offered little more than a report number. Brooklyn stayed up, curled on the couch, watching footage from the past week's coverage. One headline stood out on a talk show. From silenced to spotlight, is Brooklyn Carter the new face of athletic activism? Alicia sat beside her. People see you now, she said softly. Yeah, Brooklyn replied. But do they really see me, or do they see who they want me to be? Alicia brushed a hand over her shoulder. Let them see both. Outside, the porch light flickered, then stayed on. Inside, Brooklyn opened her laptop again. She drafted a reply to Carson's email, then deleted it, then rewrote it again. She still didn't know what she would decide. But this time, she knew she'd choose on her own terms. No edits. No filters. No silence. Just as Brooklyn closes her laptop for the night, her phone buzzes again, this time with a video file sent anonymously. The caption reads, This is what your coach did to someone else. Before you. The anonymous video file arrived just after midnight. Brooklyn stared at it for a long moment before pressing play, her thumb trembling despite her effort to stay steady. The living room was dark except for the dim glow of the screen, the house silent except for the steady hum of the refrigerator. Malcolm and Alicia were asleep upstairs, exhausted by days of non-stop news, legal battles, and emotional strain. But Brooklyn couldn't sleep. Not after everything. Not after the threats. Not after the scholarship offer that felt like both recognition and warning. The video opened with grainy gym footage from another school, one Brooklyn didn't recognize. A teenage girl, about her age, stood on the court in basketball gear, dribbling during warm-ups. Her movements were sharp, fluid, unmistakably skilled. A voice came from off-camera, cold, sharp, and chilling in its familiarity. Tone it down. You people make everything look messy. Brooklyn froze. It was Delaney. Years earlier. Same tone. Same venom. Same quiet cruelty, dressed as instruction. The girl stopped dribbling. Her shoulders slumped. The video ended abruptly. Brooklyn stared at the black screen long after it faded, a shiver running down her spine. Before you. The caption suddenly made sickening sense. He had done this before, again and again, like a shadow that never learned to disappear because nobody had ever forced it into the light. She sent the video to Lena. Then she sat back, hugging her knees, understanding more clearly than ever that this wasn't just a story about one coach or one school. It was a system that had looked the other way for years. And now the backlash had begun. The next morning, Malcolm found the first letter. It lay on the front porch, half tucked under the welcome mat. No envelope, just a folded sheet of paper weighed down by a small stone. He picked it up, assuming it was another note from supporters. But the handwriting was jagged, rushed, and venomous. Your daughter is ruining this town. Leave, or else. Malcolm stared at it for a long time, the paper crinkling in his tightening fist. He didn't show Brooklyn. Not yet. But by afternoon, another arrived. Then another. 2 were stuffed in the mailbox. 1 was taped to the car window. 1 was slipped under the door. And by evening, someone posted their home address on social media. Within hours, a white supremacist forum had picked it up. Brooklyn saw the post before Malcolm did. She stood frozen, phone in hand, reading the comments that followed. She's lying. Make an example out of them. Bet they shut up if they lose something important. We know where they live. Her chest tightened. A dull buzzing filled her ears. For a moment, everything around her felt distant. Walls, lights, even her own breath. Malcolm stormed into the room when he saw her pale face. What happened? He demanded. She turned the screen toward him. His expression shifted from confusion to horror to a fury so deep it showed in every muscle of his body. No, he whispered. No, this is not happening. Alicia rushed in next. When she saw the screen, she gasped and stepped back as if struck. They posted our address? Brooklyn swallowed hard. Dad, they're threatening us. That night was the first night none of them slept. Malcolm checked every lock twice. Then again, he installed a security app on all their phones, changed the Wi-Fi password, and unplugged the smart doorbell. He paced the living room like a guard in the dark, every shadow a threat, every creak a warning. Around 3 a.m., something hit the house. A small, sharp crack. Then another. Brooklyn shot upright from the couch. Malcolm ran to the porch, hard in his throat, and found their mailbox crushed. Metal bent inward like an animal had bitten through it. Sharp dents, fresh paint scratches. A final message spray-painted on the side. Enough! Alicia called the police. 2 officers arrived, took photos, made notes and promised patrol cars in the neighborhood. But they seemed rushed, almost bored, as if this was just another routine call. They won't do anything, Malcolm muttered after they left. Not until someone gets hurt. Dad, Brooklyn said softly. We already are. The next morning, Malcolm found the tires on the family car slashed. Deep cuts. 4 perfect diagonal slashes, deliberate and methodical. Brooklyn stood on the driveway, arms wrapped around herself, watching her father crouch beside the ruined tires. She had never seen him look defeated. Not like this. He wasn't crying, but his eyes held the weight of someone who had run out of ways to protect the people he loved. I can't even get you to school, he whispered. We don't need to go anywhere, Brooklyn said. Not today. But Malcolm took a long breath and stood. I'm calling someone. Who?
The FBI.
And for once, Brooklyn didn't question him. To their surprise, the Bureau responded quickly. Doxing, interstate threats, targeted harassment tied to civil rights litigation. It was enough to trigger federal attention. 2 agents showed up that afternoon, stern, efficient, and already briefed on the case. They walked through the home, checked the mailbox, photographed the threats, recorded statements. One agent, Agent Morrison, turned to Brooklyn. These threats aren't about you, he said. They're about what you represent. People get scared when the truth threatens their comfort. Brooklyn asked a question she never imagined asking at 17. Are we safe? The agent paused before answering. We're going to do everything we can. It wasn't a yes. It wasn't a promise. But it was the closest thing to both. For the next several days, the Carters lived with a strange, suffocating mixture of fear and defiance. The protest scheduled for the end of the week grew online, drawing support from students, parents, activists, and athletes across the state. Brooklyn watched videos of strangers chanting her name. Let her play. Justice for Brooklyn Carter. No more silence. She felt two things at once: power and pressure. The night of the protest approached like the thick air before a storm. Malcolm considered canceling. He stood in the living room, pacing back and forth. "We're targets," he said. "Anyone could show up. Anyone could do something." Alicia sat on the couch, exhausted. "If we don't go, they win." Brooklyn stood beside the window, staring at the street outside. "I'm not running," she said. "I'm done running." Malcolm looked at her, really looked at her, her strength, her resolve, her unwillingness to let fear shrink her. He nodded slowly. "Then we'll go." But the night did not unfold as any of them expected. Just 2 hours before the protest, the news broke. Malcolm was in the kitchen preparing signs. Brooklyn was in her room choosing a jacket. Alicia was printing out chants and flyers. Then Malcolm's phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. Each notification came from a different number. Confused, he unlocked the screen and froze. Breaking news alert. Coach Richard Delaney, found unconscious behind Madison High School Stadium. Malcolm read it again to make sure he saw it correctly. Brooklyn opened her bedroom door at the same moment he called out her name. She saw the look on his face. "Dad, what happened?" He handed her the phone. Brooklyn stared at the headline, breath catching. Her hands went cold. Alicia rushed over. "What is it?" Brooklyn whispered the words. "He's unconscious. Someone found him behind the stadium." A small portion of Brooklyn's chest tightened in fear. Fear that this would twist the narrative again. Fear of what people would say. Fear that somehow blame would shift back to her family. "How?" Malcolm murmured. "What happened?"
Nobody knew.
No details. No suspects. No explanation. Just one sentence that echoed through every phone, every home, and across every corner of the community. Coach Delaney was discovered lying face down near the equipment building and transported to the hospital in critical condition. Brooklyn looked at her father, voice strained. "Dad, this is going to change everything again, isn't it?" Malcolm nodded slowly. "Yes, Brooklyn," he whispered. "Everything." Minutes later, a news anchor announces a stunning detail. The last person seen near the stadium, before Delaney was found, was wearing a Madison team jacket. The snow light of early evening still lingered over the high school stadium when police floodlights snapped on, harsh glaring beams that cut across the turf like judgment itself. Neighborhood news vans and cell phone camera screens glowed from every angle, reporters clustered behind yellow tape, murmuring names into microphones. The banner headline that had broken just hours earlier lingered on every phone screen. Coach Delaney found unconscious, last seen wearing Madison jacket. For a moment, the world felt fractured. Malcolm Carter stood behind the line of police tape, arms folded, eyes fixed on the spot where the ambulance had taken the coach. Brooklyn clung to his side, legs trembling, and Alicia stood a short distance away, hand over her mouth. None of them spoke, not because they didn't want to, but because fear, shock, and uncertainty had frozen their voices. Within minutes, uniformed officers approached Malcolm. "Sir," one officer said, voice loud over the ambient noise. "We need you to step forward for questioning, please. Come with us." Malcolm straightened, head high, but inside his heart pounded so hard he thought it might crack his chest. "On what grounds?" he asked, voice calm but rigid. "I'm his father's advocate. I haven't done anything but demand answers." The officer's face was impassive. "There's a witness claim. You were seen near the stadium coach's truck about 30 minutes before his body was found." A stunned hush fell over the crowd. Flashbulbs popped. Cameras panicked, white screens glared. Brooklyn inhaled sharply. "Dad, tell them he can't treat you like that." But Malcolm had no immediate defense. The world had tilted, not because of what he had done, but because of what someone claimed he did. They put him in handcuffs. Even as they did, reporters shouted questions. Is this retaliation? Does this show systemic racism turns violent? Is this about your daughter's fight for justice, or personal revenge? Malcolm turned around, eyes blazing. "You think I hurt him?" "Me?" he shouted. "Then check the record. I'm the one who brought the truth out." But words meant little when metal cuffs bit into skin and uniformed officers surrounded him like vultures waiting for a carcass. Brooklyn stumbled back, tears burning behind her eyes. Alicia tried to reach for her but was held back by bystanders and riot tape rope alike. "Don't let them film me like this," Malcolm yelled over his shoulder. "This is not what happened." An officer shoved him into a police cruiser. The door slammed, the engine revved, and with a roar he was gone. Sirens wailing. Cameras flashing. The crowd surged forward, questions and outrage filling the air. Soon after, reporters began airing conflicting footage clips, some from the stadium's security cameras, others from bystanders' cell phones. Snippets spread across social media. The first clip was shaky, grainy, taken from the rear equipment building where Coach Delaney's body had been found. It showed a hooded figure moving quickly, carrying what looked like a duffel bag, limping slightly, moving away from the building. The angle was poor, the lighting worse, but as the clip paused on a frame where a partial team jacket was visible, screens froze, poisoning public opinion in an instant. Within hours, hashtags trended ironically. Nye Carter caught. Justice for Coach. Madison murder mystery. Brooklyn shut off her phone. She couldn't bear it. In the living room, Lena paced. Malcolm's chair sat empty. Alicia sank beside it, fingers interlocked, white knuckles tightening. We have to get a lawyer for Malcolm. Criminal defense, Lena said quietly, urgency in her tone. But more than that, we need to find evidence, surveillance footage, timestamps, any record that proves he wasn't there. Alicia swallowed. The security cameras, the ones on the field, the parking lot.
Yes, Lena said, but someone's already trying to frame him. Whoever leaked that clip knew exactly what they were doing.
Brooklyn stood, stepping toward the window and staring at the empty street outside. Her mind raced, his body broken, her father behind bars. The story turned upside down in a single night. This was what fear looked like. The next morning, the first door knocked came softly but rang sharp. 2 FBI agents stood in suits by the threshold. Their badges glinted. "Miss Carter?" one asked, looking at Brooklyn. She nodded. "We need to secure any video, any footage, any records of entry and exit from the stadium last night," he said. "We also need to interview you and your parents, and any witnesses you might know." Brooklyn swallowed, voice small. "We don't know anything more than the clips people are already posting." The agent met her eyes. "We're looking for the person who sent the anonymous video. That might give us a lead." Inside, the family huddled. Shame, fear, betrayal. Each emotion layered on top of the other like cracked plaster. Then a whisper started circulating outside. A teacher. One of Coach Delaney's assistants. A man named Greg Harper. Old enough to know better. Quiet enough to stay under the radar, but loud enough to be heard by someone who saw him walking into the locker room with a bag earlier that night. Brooklyn's breath caught. "If that's true," Malcolm said gravely, "then he might have had motive beyond racism. Something personal." The agents nodded. They were already pulling up records, tracing communications, checking payrolls. By late afternoon, they had surveillance footage from a stadium side gate, timestamped 7:11 p.m. It showed Harper entering with a duffel bag. Then 7:18 p.m., him leaving, bag still in hand, coat hood up, walking with a limp. That matched the time investigators believed the attack occurred. Word spread fast. Local news updated assistant on tape entering stadium before Coach discovered. Harper's attorney issued a statement. His client was only doing late-night inventory, as part of maintenance duty. But more footage surfaced. From a nearby convenience store. A body cam style video from a passerby. The timestamp read 7:12 p.m. Harper appeared again. This time lighting a cigarette outside the stadium. Hood still up. Duffel bag slung over shoulder. Then walking out of frame in a hurry. The angle shifted. Something dropped from his bag as he moved, bouncing against the pavement. A long, thin object. A black nylon strap. So out of context that even the untrained eye, including Brooklyn's, recognized it as something like a tool bag strap, or maybe a chain lock of some kind. Within hours, the narrative flipped again. Social media shifted from Carter caught to which coach did it, and assistant exposed. Brooklyn saw the change. It felt like sliding from ice to solid ground. Terrifying, but at least there was traction now. That night, the family gathered around the TV, watching as the station aired a loop of all the available footage. The anchor's voice boomed in the living room, summarizing developments. Authorities confirm video evidence shows Madison High assistant coach, Greg Harper, entering stadium grounds within minutes of the alleged incident. Sources say Harper is now considered the prime suspect. No charges yet. Investigation ongoing. Malcolm exhaled heavily, relief and anger warring in his eyes. "They're shifting the blame," he said. "They're trying to make this a case of a bad employee, not a school run by biased leadership." Brooklyn looked at him, voice quiet but firm. "Either way," she said, "they won't silence us. The next morning, cameras swarmed outside the courthouse again. Reporters pushed for statements, activists gathered, signs in hand. Students from other schools posted solidarity photos, athletic jerseys, raised fists, and slogans, exposed, no more silence, systemic accountability. Inside the courtroom, the district attorney took the stand with heavy eyes. "We are reviewing all evidence," she said. "If guilt is established, we will file formal charges against Mr. Harper. At this time, Mr. Carter is released from custody. We are also informing the court that this incident appears connected to the broader civil rights investigation into the district." A low murmur of relief spread through the gallery, but the backlash was far from over. When the assistant coach's lawyer tried to enter evidence, character references, performance reviews, spokespeople from civil rights organizations, and former players rallied outside the courthouse, demanding full transparency. Then came the unexpected twist. A major local news channel obtained from a source a partial transcript of a school board meeting from 2018, before Delaney was ever accused publicly. In it, a board member casually referred to cleansing the athletic program if outside pressures increased. The language was vague enough to be denied, but clear enough for everyone who heard it to understand. When the clip aired live, the murmurs grew into outrage. Brooklyn's phone buzzed again overnight, this time with a message from a friend whose sister had once played for Jefferson Ridge High. The message read, "Greg Harper was at Jefferson Ridge too. They moved him after several kids complained. It wasn't just Delaney." Suddenly, the scope of corruption felt staggering, as if every school that Delaney and Harper had touched carried a piece of the same rot. As dawn broke, Brooklyn stepped outside. The protest banners hung limp in the cold air, the chanting voices quiet now. She closed her eyes, letting the winter wind wash over her face. She thought of all the voices finally rising together. Athletes who had been silenced. Parents who had watched quietly. Administrators who had ignored. She felt somewhere deep in her chest a weight, but also a spark. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't just survive exposure. It spreads. Late that night, as Brooklyn reads old posts from under the radar forums, a new anonymous account uploads dozens of photos tagged with Madison High, but the faces are names of black athletes who vanished from the team lists over the past decade. One message blazes across the screen: "Follow the erased." The morning air at Carson University was cold and crisp, but inside the locker room, warmth buzzed under the bright gym lights. Brooklyn Carter laced up her cleats for the first time in a college uniform, her jersey number shining in bold white over deep navy fabric. The jersey fit snugly across her shoulders, heavier with meaning than with cloth. This wasn't just her name on a back, it was a statement, a claim, a loud answer to every silent bench, every erased poster, every whispered slur she had endured. Malcolm sat front row in the stands, his chest tight with anticipation. Alicia and Lena were there too, their expressions a mixture of pride and nerves, and beyond them, faces lit by smartphone glow, banners, signs, many bearing the slogan that had once trended nationwide: "Let Brooklyn play." The stadium hummed with expectancy. It felt less like a season opener, more like a reckoning. Brooklyn's teammates filed out first, their shouts and stomps echoing across the field. She took a deep breath, letting the damp grass smell fresh, clean, full of possibility. She closed her eyes, the last 6 months flooding through her mind: the locker room confrontation with her father, the shredded posters, the viral video, the lawsuit, the secret emails, the public backlash, the threats, the showdown at court, the college offer, every blow that should have broken her. But she had held on. She had refused to disappear. When the referee blew the whistle for kickoff, the crowd's roar crashed into her like thunder. The ball moved fast down the field. Brooklyn's muscles responded. Instinct, training, desire. She ran along the sideline, breath steady, eyes on the ball, mind clear. Midway through the first half, a lapse. The opposing defense collapsed over the center. Their midfielders pressed hard. The ball slipped loose. Most players froze, hesitant. But Brooklyn didn't. Her focus narrowed, laser sharp. She sprinted forward, intercepted the path. The grass thudded under her cleats. There was space. Silence compressed. She looked up and saw an opening. She pushed the ball forward. A defender charged. She feinted. Practiced move from summer drills. Painful drills she had done alone. The defender stumbled. The ball rolled free. The goal was clear. Time slowed. Brooklyn took the shot. The stadium held its breath. The net rippled. The crowd erupted. She ran her arms wide, eyes shimmering with tears. She refused to drop. Her teammates lifted her off the ground, laughing, shouting, embracing. Cameras flashed like lightning strikes. Malcolm rose to his feet, cheering, face brimming. Alicia cried softly. Lena's fist went up in silent triumph. But this goal, this victory, was more than points on the board. It was a signal, a message far bigger than a game. In the stands, supporters, former classmates, activists, journalists, families of black athletes, strangers who had seen her fight, cheered with the volume of a movement. Banners fluttered, signs waved, flags snapped in winter wind. The momentum was deafening. After the game, reporters pressed toward her like waves. Microphones extended. Cameras surrounded. The air tasted like electricity. A young journalist with a pen and recorder shoved forward. "Brooklyn, what does this moment mean to you?" She caught her breath, voice soft but steady. "It means justice. Not punishment, not vengeance, but visibility, truth. Every black kid on a field deserved a shot. Not because they're special, because they exist, because we belong." Behind her, parents nodded. Younger teammates dared to raise their heads higher. And among the sea of faces in the stands, a new movement began to crystallize. Not just support for her, but for fairness everywhere. Later in the locker room, she texted her mother, "We did it." Alicia whispered back, "You always did." But as the crowd roared outside like thunder, and celebration echoed in the hallways, and across phones everywhere, a single camera zoomed in on one figure in the stands, a teenage girl, alone, seated in the bleachers. She was black. She wore a hoodie over sweatpants, sneakers dusty from cold concrete. Her face was serious, reserved, her eyes locked on Brooklyn. Her lips didn't form a smile. She didn't wave. She didn't cheer. She just stared, steady, intense, hopeful. In that moment, the world seemed to pause. Brooklyn glanced up, searching. Her eyes met the girl's. Their gazes held, locked across the stadium. In that instant, Brooklyn saw more than admiration. She saw possibility, a mirror, a promise, because Brooklyn had fought for more than herself. She had made space, not just to play, to belong. That girl in the stands, benched, erased on the sidelines, saw not just a champion, but hope. Malcolm saw it too. He stood watching the girl, then looked at his daughter with a mixture of love, pride, and something heavier. A promise. The snowlight faded into evening shadows. The crowd thinned, banners folded, signs lowered. But something changed. The field felt different. Not just a pitch, a platform. The echo of chants lingered far beyond the stadium. Voices once silenced had found resonance. Brooklyn left the locker room with her family. Cameras followed, flashes popped, but this time, she wasn't running. She walked steady, shoulders squared. A reporter asked quietly, "What's next for you, Brooklyn?" She paused, looking toward the parking lot, toward home, toward future fields she would never take for granted. She closed her eyes, one slow breath. "Now," she said, "we make sure no one else gets benched for being themselves." Behind her, in the lingering crowd, the girl in the hoodie rose slowly, lifted her sign. It read in bold letters, "Play for every Brooklyn." The sign shook slightly in her hands, but her eyes did not waver. And as she raised it, the camera captured the moment. The world watched. As the stands clear and the lights dim, Brooklyn's phone buzzes again. A message from an unknown number. It reads, "It's bigger than one field. Are you ready? The battle may be over, but the movement is just beginning." No one should be erased for the color of their skin. Not in the classroom, not on the field, not anywhere. If Brooklyn's story made you feel something, don't let it end here. Type yes if you believe in justice. Subscribe if this broke your heart.